to. I grew up in a small town in North Carolina, Salisbury, North Carolina. It's right between Charlotte and Greensboro. And one Sunday when I was 12 years old, I don't know what came over me, but I picked up the telephone and called the local radio station and told the announcer on duty that I really enjoyed listening, and especially the sports. And he said, well, young man, why don't you come down and I will give you a tour of the station on a Sunday afternoon. And so my mom and dad took me down and I got a tour. And the second I walked into that little radio station 1,000 years ago, I knew what I wanted to do. It was just great. It was fabulous, fascinating. And I started hanging out every Sunday at the station. And one day the sports guy showed up and he said, well, you know, duh, if you love sports and you love radio, help us broadcast these American Legion baseball games. And we broadcast them because the team was so good and they were state champs and they're still great to this day. So everybody in town followed them. It was a little mill town, you know, Salisbury. So the whole town was in, and they packed a little ballpark at the place I eventually went to college, Catawba College, a D2 program. And I would get the guy a Coke and hang out. And one night he says, you ready to make your debut? And I said, well, I guess I am. And so I got the mic in the bottom of the 7th inning, and our first baseman hit a home run. I don't know what I said, but the ball went over the fence and the scoreboard and the Coca-Cola sign. And it was one of the few home runs they hit all year. And the announcer gets the microphone back in the top of the 8th inning. He says, ladies and gentlemen, I have been waiting all season to call a home run. And when we hit one, I've got some 12-year-old kid on the mic. And that's how it started for me. And I have been doing this ever since. Now, I wasn't on the air when I was 12. That was a lark, of course. But by the time I was 19, I was working full-time at the radio station. I was going to school full-time. So I would start at 6 in the morning, and I'd go till 9, 10 at night, every night, and loved every second of it. And I've been doing this ever since. Started in radio, then I moved over to TV when the regional cable boom began in the 80s, and started doing a lot of baseball for the Orioles in Baltimore, and basketball with the Bullets, and a lot of college games. I ended up working for ESPN and CBS, and then did team sports. I did the Detroit Tigers on radio for 3 years, and I've been here in Atlanta since '96. So this is my 24th year of calling the Hawks, my 31st year of doing ACC basketball. And I know I don't look that old. I know you're shocked, but that's how it started for me, and I've been doing this ever since. I've anchored. I've done just about every job you can do in this business, but I've been so fortunate and so lucky because it hasn't felt like a job to me. It has been just a labor of love, and I just have so enjoyed it, and that's basically what I do. I call all the games. I do the TBT in the summertime for ESPN, that $2 million winner-take-all tournament that comes up in July. Fran Fraschilla and I do that, and I do some college football and basketball, and that's it. Beats working.
That's really awesome to hear. So you mentioned that you dove into American Legion baseball when you were 12. So obviously you're a lot more than the word veteran would support in sports terms, you know. You've been doing it your whole life. So what was an interest, or were you really into sports beforehand, or was it the radio that was more important to you? What was it that really made you dive straight on in?
Yeah, well, it was just the fascination, I think, with the whole thing. I mean, as a kid growing up, you know, you guys know what a transistor radio is. Well, you know, I used to dial it in, and I'd listen to the ball games laying in bed at night, and just loved it, you know. And I loved like listening to all news stations, you know, WCBS out of New York and WCAU out of Philadelphia. And I'd listen to it on my little radio, and just the enormity of it all. I just loved it. But once I went into that station as a kid, then I was hooked. I mean, I loved every facet of it, and just taking out the garbage and filing records and all that, but always a sports fan, you know, for as long as I can remember. And that's what drove it, you know. One unique thing about growing up in Salisbury is it was the home of the National Sportscasters and Sports Writers Association. And this is a group that honors every year 50 state winners, the writers and casters, right, and the national award winners. So when I turned 16 and I got my driver's license, I was placed on the transportation committee, which entailed driving to the Charlotte airport and picking up these winners and hauling them back to Salisbury. But in the backseat of my car, I had the legends in the business. I had, you know, Lindsay, people that names might not mean much to you all, but these are the giants of the industry back in the day. The Lindsey Nelsons, the Chris Schenkels, the Kurt Gowdies, and Ray Scotts. And, you know, for those of you in Southern California, you know, Jim Murray, the legendary LA Times writer, you know, would be in the backseat of my car. And I'd ask them all the same question. I want to be a sportscaster. What advice do you have? So it was great for me to rub elbows with these people in a very low-key setting. But it's kind of demystified it for me in a lot of ways because they were just regular guys. And that was great. And then as the years go by, you know, to see the ladies come into the business, which was great, and have them as state award winners was fantastic. You know, it's just how it's grown, and it's just was great for me. So those two things were dynamite, you know, and I got to go to college basketball games when I was a junior in high school and, you know, did all this neat stuff because it was right there, you know, the ACC, that's the hotbed, Duke, Carolina, NC State, and Wake Forest right there in the state. So I was very, very lucky young man, no doubt.
After you got that kind of youth training and getting further in your career, how did NBA come about, and did you always think you wanted to do play-by-play for basketball?
So I've always done basketball and baseball. Now I'm pretty much exclusively hoop now because now we do every game and the seasons overlap so much you really can't do both. But before, maybe 15 years ago, I did both. I did baseball in the summertime with the Braves, did those games for 10 years, and then I'd switch over. When they ended, I'd pick up basketball. But growing up in North Carolina in a basketball hotbed, like we did, you just sort of fell in love with basketball, and the broadcasting of the games meant everything. Long before there was cable TV and internet and all this stuff, very select few games came on. And so you were waiting for the game of the week to come up on Saturday afternoon. And you were waiting, you know, for the ACC tournament to come on because those games, you know, the semifinals and the finals were televised, you know, like, wow, this is fantastic. And so it was a big deal. And to be one of the announcers on one of those packages was a really big deal. So that's what got me hooked, and that's kind of what stoked the flames to get there. And I've been lucky enough to do ACC games, and then I just sort of gradually moved into the NBA. When I came here to Atlanta, I'd always been a big NBA fan. I had filled in a lot in Washington and Baltimore, but doing the Hawks was my first time doing the NBA full time, and I've done that. This is my 24th year now with the Hawks.
What do you remember about your first televised gig for the NBA? What emotions were running through your mind?
You know, I had two exhibition games. One was against the Lakers with Magic Johnson, and one was against the Bulls with Michael Jordan. Not bad. Pretty good way to break in, right? Now, they were preseason games, and the guy that I was filling in for was off doing the NFL. But it was like love at first sight. I mean, I've always been a huge basketball fan. And then to see it up close and personal like that, and getting a chance to be around the players and the coaches and the other broadcasters, and it was just like I was fanboy. You know, it was just, this is awesome, and got to call it, and it was great. But I had done so many games, high school and college, leading up to that it just felt like sort of a natural progression. The enormity of the NBA didn't really hit me that much because I'd been doing so much on TV prior to that. It was just sort of a natural extension. But once you get there, man, it's like a drug. I mean, you can't wait to get to the arena.
It's really awesome to hear. So, you know, as you mentioned, you said, you know, you called games where Jordan was in it, Magic Johnson. You know, you called games for a lot of great players, obviously, throughout your career. Can you describe emotions? You know, is it almost more memorable to call a game with Jordan in it, or Kobe or LeBron, or all these awesome players we've seen?
You
Is it a
know,
little bit more meaningful, or?
no, not really. Because once you figure out why you're there and what your job is, the star aspect of it kind of fades because you're there to tell the story. You're there to report on the game. And, the play by play guy or girl is sort of the front person of the telecast, but you're just representing an army of people behind you that you don't see. Your producer, your director, your ADs, your APs, the guys in tape. There's a whole army to make you look good. And so my job is to just keep the train running on time, get to the breaks, tee up my color guy, introduce the sideline reporter, all those things. And you're not really worried about the fact that, Kobe's out there or, Magic or Larry Bird or, name the star. That's just part of, the theater of the game. But you're kind of taken back from that. You got to step back and do your job. So no, that I wouldn't say that really enters into it. I mean, yeah, before the game, and you see them out there for the first time, it's kind of cool. But after a while, that wears off. You got a job to do, and you go out there and do it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Great. I think one of the hardest parts of this industry for many people is keeping fresh content when maybe your team is having a down season or in a slump. So what is your strategy when maybe the team's not doing the best and you still want to keep fans excited?
Yeah, great question. Don't let the emotions of winning and losing affect your job performance. That would be my first piece of advice, because you're not there to worry about they're not paying you to worry about the wins and the losses. Coach is getting paid to worry about the wins and the losses. You're not. You're there to report on the game. So if the team's not playing well, then what can I come up with that is interesting, that is telling the tale? Great stories can be told with major losing streaks as much as major winning streaks. And it's your job to dig down and find out those stories. You have to get to know the players. You've got to get to know the coaches. You've got to just immerse yourself in the team and the sport and the season to get that out. And there's lots of ways to get that, talking to parents, talking to former coaches. Everybody's got a great backstory, particularly by the time they get, to the college level. So there's a lot of material there. And don't let the winning and losing. The Hawks, we got the second worst record in the East, but that doesn't, I prefer we have the second best record in the East. It makes my job a lot easier, but it doesn't stop what I have to do to get ready. I've got to tell the story of tonight's game. And if we're 20-47, which we are, then them's the facts. So I've got to find out a way to tell the stories of Trae Young and John Collins and Kevin Huerter and DeAndre Hunter and Cam Reddish and lay it all out there and make it interesting and lively and entertaining. So that's the challenge. But don't get in the emotions of the ups and downs, of winning and losing, because that you've got to be detached from that emotionally.
Great. Thank you.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's really hard to choose just one season over the many seasons that you've covered for the Hawks. But is there one in particular that you really enjoyed covering?
Oh, yes. 5 years ago, I guess it was, we won 60 games. We had the best record in the East. First time we'd ever gone to the Eastern Conference Finals in our history. We moved here in 1968 from St. Louis, played 2 years in the Western Conference, went to the West Finals. But since we moved to the East in 1970, we'd never gotten there. Even Dominique's great teams couldn't get past Boston. So to make it was great. And that 60-win season, we won 19 consecutive games, which is, unheard of. That's a quarter of your season. We play 82, and you win 19 in a row. That's about 25% of your games. And we went unbeaten. We're the only NBA team ever, before or since, to go unbeaten through an entire calendar month. January of that season, we went 16-0, never been done before or since. Even all the, the great teams with LA and what Milwaukee's done the last couple of years. Nobody's done that. So that was a magic carpet ride. I mean, every night, it's funny. You hear about load management, how tired these guys are and all that blah, blah, blah. Well, I'll tell you what, when we were winning 19 in a row, nobody tired. Nobody worried about load management. We couldn't wait to get to the arena. We didn't care about what time we got in. If we're playing back-to-backs, we were just up here. I mean, we were rolling. And had we stayed healthy, I am convinced that we would have gone to the NBA Finals and played Golden State. Not sure we would have beaten them, but I think we would have beaten Cleveland. I think we would have beaten LeBron. We kind of had their number. But by the time we got to the end of the line, we were banged up. We were not nearly the same team we were. We'd lost our best defender, Thabo Cephalosha, the key guy we had to slow LeBron down a little bit. We didn't have a superstar. We sort of did it with a team concept and great ball movement and just a joy to watch. So yeah, that was a very, very special season.
That's awesome. And that team had Schroeder and I believe Al Horford was still there at the time, correct?
Yep. Paul Millsap, Kyle Korver.
Oh my God, Paul Millsap.
Dennis,
what a throwback.
Jeff Teague. And, yeah, we were really good. Really, really good. And they played a style that was fun to watch. They shared the ball, didn't really have a dominant score. Everybody averaged like 18, 17, 16, but we led the universe in assists. And it was so great to watch the ball movement. They played so unselfishly and they shot the three ball so well. It just made it fun. And it wasn't, they were on cruise control. I mean, we had a 10-game lead by the 1st of March in our conference, unheard of. We left Cleveland. I mean, it was eat my dust, man. And we were rolling. But then the injuries, and we didn't have a LeBron to throw the ball to with 20 seconds to go in the game and go win the game. We had to do it with all 5 guys. And when we lost our rhythm with all the injuries, that's when we started to back off just a little bit. But when we were rolling, man, we were really fun to watch.
Yeah, I'm actually going to go off of my script here for a second because I've had a question that popped up in my mind that has been tearing at me since the start. So you've commentated on NBA games and done play-by-play since 1996. So that's the end of the Jordan era. You saw the Lakers three-peat, Miami, Steve Nash. You saw him you've called games for some of the best players to ever play the game. And the Hawks obviously have had a lot of transition through that time. Do you like the Hawks uniforms now, or do you prefer the old ones that Dominique and the boys used to wear?
Yeah, it's funny. I have liked them all. I like especially the new Peachtree ones we have, the black and gold, I think are really sharp when we put the black and gold court down. They're pretty cool. I like the white and red with a little green in it, that little lime green thing. That was pretty cool, but I like our uniforms. The ones when I came in '96, we had the big hawk on the front with Mutombo and all those guys, Smitty and Mookie Blaylock, and had the big feathers on the chest and all that stuff. That was pretty cool. So I've liked them all. Yeah.
Awesome. So, you're a very decorated broadcaster yourself, but you also have the opportunity to sit next to Hall of Famer. What's it like working with Dominique?
Oh, it's great. It's great. It's funny. When I was just getting started in North Carolina and I was doing high school basketball, I was assigned to do Salisbury High School. And we had a pretty good team one year and end up going to the state playoffs and having a pretty good run. And lo and behold, Salisbury High School in the state, I think it was the quarterfinals, ends up playing Washington, North Carolina, Dominique Wilkins High School. So I broadcast Neek in high school. In college, when he was at Georgia, I did a game when Georgia was in the NIT. And then I did the tail end of his pro career, and now he sits next to me every night. So I have known this guy forever, and sitting next to him, and the stories are just great. He's the life of the party, the stories, he's just a fun guy to be around. And of course, being a Hall of Fame player, he's just everybody. It's kiss the ring finger, when he walks into the arena, because everybody loves him. and everybody, you know, and even the young guys of today who never saw him play, pay homage, come by, say hello, you know, give their respects to the Hall of Famer. It's really neat to see, but it's fun. It's fun being with him, just hanging around.
Awesome.
If you just sit next to him before the game, a who's who of basketball will come by because everybody wants to say hi to Neek.
That's awesome. That's really cool to hear. And I think that is probably one of the most fascinating parts about sports is stories just like that. And how awesome things just like that happen. So
yeah, it's
thank
crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And you think back, you know, to Neek's career, a lot of people think that game 7, when he had the shootout with Bird, was an Eastern Conference Finals, but it wasn't. It was a second round. And, you know, the Hawks were really good with those teams. You know, Doc was at the point, Doc Rivers, and, you know, you had Neek and Randy Whitman and a really good team. But the East was as loaded then as the West is now. You had Boston, Philly, Detroit, Chicago, Milwaukee, Atlanta. I mean, you just kept going down, 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 bing, bing, bing. I mean, it was murderer's row every night. And it's kind of like the way the West is now, and how cyclical it is. But back then, they just couldn't get over the hump. And you know, it's funny. There's two things in our franchise's history that you wonder, if things had gone a little differently, what would the story of Atlanta basketball be? And one is that game 7. Had they beaten the Celtics and gone to the Eastern Conference Finals, well, who knows? They may have won the whole thing. What would that have changed in our city? You know, would it have just skyrocketed the Hawks? Because we were back then, you know, we were on TBS, national TV, like the Braves were, almost every night. And would it have skyrocketed the Hawks to be one of the elite franchises in the NBA today? And then I think back to the 60-win team. You know, if we'd have hung together and stayed healthy and we'd have made it to the NBA Finals, what would that have done, you know, for basketball here in the South? So 2 defining moments. You know, to be an Atlanta sports fan is to live with a lot of heartache. And, you know, you guys know what happened to our Falcons in the Super Bowl. You know, when it's your year, you got to win it, and you got to come through. And our teams, with the exception of the 95 Braves, just haven't been able to get over that last hurdle to win it all. So I think back to those times.
Awesome. I know there's a lot of royalty in the NBA, you know, a lot of certain destinations stars want to go. You know, they want to go join the Lake Show out in Los Angeles, Boston, these blue blood franchises. And obviously Atlanta is one of those. And Atlanta is such a great city, a cultural hub. But do you feel like the city attracts superstars, or do you feel like the Hawks are taking an approach of building from the inside, with drafting stars like Collins and Trae Young?
Yeah, we are. I mean, our core group, they're all 22, 21, 20 years old, and these are the guys that are going to carry us forward. Now we're going to augment them, obviously, with free agents and the draft and all that stuff. But this is our group, you know, with Clint Capella, who came over from Houston. But it's interesting. I don't think that today's superstar chooses the franchise. LeBron, for example, he decided he wanted to go make movies. So he ends up in LA. Now, probably got to play for the Clippers, so that left the Lakers. So did the Lakers choose LeBron, or did LeBron choose the Lakers? And you look at Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant. Now, I'm telling you, they have no feeling for the Brooklyn Nets like about you have feelings for the Brooklyn Nets, which is zero. But they want to play with their friends. So they team up and they say, well, let's go to Brooklyn. And that's just about how it went down. So, you know, you look at a franchise like the Lakers, as glorious as they have been for so long. Well, the last 6 years prior to this one, you know, they were nowhere. They couldn't get a free agent. They couldn't go to the playoffs. They couldn't do anything. The Knicks, I mean, this is the biggest market we have. And they've fallen all over themselves to get out of their own way. They can't attract. They can't even get a ball club together. So I don't think that the franchise or the city does it anymore. These guys sort of team up and decide they want to play together. Then they pick where they're going to go. And LeBron really started that, when he went to Miami. And that sort of began this trend like Anthony Davis. He's just signed a new deal in New Orleans. And he's got a couple of years to go. Paul George signs a new deal in Indiana. Well, off he goes, And so the stars sort of drive it now more than back in the day where you had, the Celtics were together forever. The Lakers were forever together. And they would meet in the finals and you had these great rivalries. That just doesn't exist anymore today.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that detracts from the game or do you think it further adds to it?
Okay. I do. Now you're talking to, I'm 7,000 years old, so I have a little different perspective on it. But I do think the sports industry exists on rivalries,
mm-hmm.
the competition. This is what drives us to watch. And if you don't have that competition, what do you have? And competition at the NBA level is born out of playoff basketball. When the Atlanta Hawks come to Staples Center, to play the Lakers, go the Laker fans, because it's just another night. We're coming to see the Lakers, and we don't really care who's on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
But when the Celtics show up, when the Pistons show up, when those Western Conference teams show up, now it means a little bit more. Why? Because you got a history. You've got all those playoff battles that you've won and lost and heroes and villains. And that's sort of what drives, the fandom, if you will. But when players, the key guys, because basketball, one guy changes everything. When the key guys move around like they do, who do you think LeBron is? He a Cavalier? Is he a Heat? Is he a Laker? Is he? You don't have that now. When you say Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, it's the Lakers. When you say Magic Johnson, it's the Lakers. James Worthy, it's the Lakers. You know what I mean? Larry Bird, it's the Celtics. Kevin McHale, Celtics. Isaiah Thomas, Pistons. And you go right on down the list. And we don't really have that as much anymore because the player loyalty has changed because the money, the money has grown so enormously that they're moving around more. And I think it hurts competition, but I may be in the minority. What do you guys think? Does it hurt? Does it help? I don't know.
I mean, for me personally, I definitely think rivalries define sports. No one's going to watch a Packers-Bears game just for the sake of it.
Mm-hmm.
I want to watch a Packers-Bears game because I know Khalil Mack's a Bear and Aaron Rodgers is a Packer, and Khalil Mack wants to take every Packer's head off every single play, so that, for me, I think that's a huge part of sports. And my mom grew up in LA, and so I've been a Dodgers and a Lakers fan forever. And so being able, I hate the Celtics. I will always root against them, but it's unfortunate to see almost like a disconnect between then and now. And it's kind of just another basketball game, I think the only time those rivalries come back in is when those superstar players play their old team. I think that's the only time it happens now in the sport of basketball, which is unfortunate, but I'm hoping a new generation of bully ball comes in and they'll want to grind it out.
And, it's not in our league, when you look at it from a 30-team perspective, we don't have to worry about selling Golden State at LA. That will sell itself. But how do you sell Detroit at Indiana on a Tuesday night in January?
Mm-hmm.
Is anybody really interested? And for the league to be successful, top to bottom, they have to be interested. And we've got to find a way to get fans interested. The base in Charlotte, the base in Indianapolis, to get them behind their ball club. And so that's why you want this competitive balance as much as you can to keep the pot boiling, to give these teams a chance to say, hey, if we can make the playoffs this year, we can sneak in there at number 7 or 8 and give yourself something to play for. One thing I don't like is this notion that unless you win the championship, it's not worth it. And that's not it at all. This is professional major league sports. You know, we are entertainment, and we are out there to put on a great show. And if you win 50 games or more, you're an elite team. If you've got home court advantage in the first round of the playoffs, you're an elite team. If you get to the Eastern Conference or Western Conference finals and you're one of the 4 best left in the world, you're really good. But I don't think that gets saluted and appreciated enough in this sports talk culture where only the champion matters. And that's not the case at all.
Mm-hmm. Definitely have to agree with you on that, especially following last season with the Raptors. Obviously, they're not probably top 4, maybe top 10, but I do definitely agree with you that I don't think people other than the champion get appreciated enough, for sure.
Right. No question.
Going off of that, what do you think defines a franchise? A team with the most stars per se, or a team with the best overall talent?
Interesting. I think the one view that I would have of a franchise is on several different levels. First of all, we know it's a business, okay? So we'll kind of set that off to the side for a second. But for a community, what these teams mean to their cities, to their communities, is enormous. And we're seeing this during this pandemic with what the baseball teams are doing, the hockey teams, the basketball teams, et cetera, to help out in their community. You know, here in Atlanta, the Hawks have been really one of the first teams out of the gate to figure out ways to help people that may never, ever see them play at State Farm Arena. But we want to be true to our city, and our city's hurting right now. We have set up 2 programs, one to help feed the healthcare workers that are on the front lines when they come off their shifts at all of the area hospitals. I think we're up to 21 now. We have meals for them waiting so they can grab and go when they go home. There's 2 meals, you know, so they can have one and somebody else can have the other. And we're making sure that happens at 21 different hospitals, okay? So that's number one. And then number 2, trying to get food into the inner city to where people can get it has been a challenge. So we partnered with a place called Gooder to set up these neighborhood grocery stores. And you can drive through, you can walk through, but you've got fresh vegetables and commodities that you would not have a chance to purchase or even get to during the shutdown. So to me, when you talk about a franchise and what it means to a community, it's not so much the stars and who plays, it's what they mean in their towns, you know, as a community asset. And I'm very proud of what we've done. And I know this is going on in every NBA city, and I can't speak for all the other sports. I'm not that sure, but I know what's going on in the NBA. And this is crucial. This is at a time of need. And our owners came right out of the gate the night that we suspended play back on March the 11th. Our owners came out and said to our people, all of our employees, and we have over 450 when you count the game night people, don't worry, you're going to get paid. I mean, wow. You know, these people who work game night, part-timers that depend on this as a source of second income or what have you, this is big for them. And they were looking at 10 home games down the drain that they wouldn't be working. And our owner stepped up and said, no, don't worry about it. We are paying you as if we played the games. Don't worry about it. And all of our full-time and part-time staff with the Hawks, nobody's been furloughed. Nobody's been let go. Everybody's getting their full pay, and they will for however long this lasts. And that's the kind of commitment that you want. So when you're talking about a franchise and what it means in a community and in a city, that's what you're talking about. All the other stuff, the winning and losing and, you know, who's on the roster and who's coaching the team. Yeah, that's all the fun and games part of it. But how do they feel about being there to their fans, to their faithful that support them each and every day, whether they attend the games or they watch on TV or listen on the radio, what have you? That's who you're there for.
Yeah, great answer. And those relationships are so important no matter who you are. So what are some key relationships that you've made in this industry?
Well, it's really twofold because you do it on the broadcast side and then you do it on the sports side, the team side. But I would say that it's not so much who it is, but it's trying to help those that are coming along next. Um, I'm at a stage of my career where I get asked by folks like you all, how to get there, how to do it, what should I do? And I want to pass it on because when I was starting off, those were the people who helped me get going and get to where I am today. And you just want to recognize that. And every time, a young broadcaster will come up to me and say, well, I want to be just like you and do the games and blah, blah, blah. And I want to set out 4 or 5. Well, here's kind of the things that you need to look at to see if you like it, first of all. Sample different things. Being the play-by-play person might not be ultimately what you do, but maybe you'd rather produce or direct or work in tape or camera or write scripts, anchor, do documentaries. There's so many things that you can do. And then on the team side, you just get to know these guys because you come up through the ranks with these men and women. They start off as players very often, and then they become coaches and then administrators, and then they start running leagues and what have you. And the group that you're with now, your age bracket, you guys will rise up together and go through the ranks. And so, don't burn bridges and make sure that you keep on top of things in terms of your contacts and what's going on in people's lives other than sports. Just don't look at a contact as how can they help me, reverse it. How can I help them? Take a keen interest in other people. When you add to that address book, put down the spouse and put down the kids' names and where they go to school and how old they are and when they have a birthday. And, stuff like that will help you with those relationships much, much more than worrying about, who won and who lost and, what happened at a particular game.
Right. Thank you. So if anyone has questions, feel free to go ahead and ask Bob.
Yeah, I have a quick question.